how do you lead yourself when you're in an era of when you feel like you've lost yourself? And what I mean by that is, as humans, we naturally go through very ebbs and flows. And especially right now, over the last 5 years, there's been so much change and transition in the world, in the workplace, for a lot of people personally, that sometimes it feels like an era of what you would say maybe like a season of glowing. But for many, I think there's been really difficult seasons of what's going on, who am I? And there's a lot of loss of identity.
When we think about just being really honest with ourselves and exploring when we're in it, right? When we're in it, as you're mentioning, because I think there's just an expectation of how we have to cosplay okayness versus
Yeah.
share everything. And so people are battling real life things and are in this era where just showing up as a whole human has all these different terms, conditions, and requirements. So it's completely unsurprising that people feel hesitant to talk about the mess, the things in the messy middle.
Life's too short for bad coffee or bad leadership. I'm Lindsay Yellin, executive leadership coach, coffee enthusiast, and former ad VP turned believer in leading from a place of possibility. On Unfiltered Leadership, we skip the buzzwords and dig into the messy, human, and powerful side of leadership with real conversations and practical takeaways. Now grab your mug. Let's dive in. Welcome to the very first episode of Unfiltered Leadership. This podcast is about going beyond the surface level advice and having honest, human conversations about what it really takes to lead yourself and others with courage and clarity. And there is no one I'd rather kick things off with than Ronnie Dickerson Stewart, an award-winning executive leadership development expert, founder of OhHeyCoach, host of the Career Clinic podcast, and soon-to-be published author, to say the least. Ronnie is also a dear, dear friend. She is a mentor. She is a partner coach. We get to work together on the regular, which is a real gift. Together, we're diving into one of the most vulnerable topics I could imagine for our very first conversation: how to lead yourself in the seasons when you feel lost. You won't want to miss the wisdom Ronnie shares or the personal stories that we reflect on together. So cozy up. It's time to get unfiltered. Hi, Ronnie. Welcome to Unfiltered Leadership. I could not be more excited for this conversation.
You have no idea how excited I am to have this conversation. So thank you for having me.
For those of you that don't know, Ronnie and I have been friends for probably 12 years now. We would not be here today recording Unfiltered Leadership if it was not for Ronnie. I many a times was a guest on her incredible podcast, The Career Clinic. And she, I don't know, Ronnie, if you told me I was trying to think about this, if it was maybe 2 years ago, but you were like, Lindsay, when are you going to start your podcast?
I
And
mean,
here we are.
little nudges here and there, definitely at least that long ago. But I mean, every single opportunity we've had to be in a podcast space and have a really thoughtful conversation, it's just the best time. And it's the most listened to episodes of my podcast by far. Every time I go back and look, I just smile. I'm like, yes, your brilliance, how you hold space for the types of conversations that people need to have, all those things. I'm in the fan club. I'm happy to be on the podcast. I'm super honored because I'm yes, this is finally happening. And now I'm going to have a completely selfishly, a bingeable podcast that I can add to my lineup. So it's cool to be on, but it's going to be even cooler to just to consume more Lindsay.
Thanks, Ronnie. You're the best. And before we get started on unfiltered conversation that I'm extremely excited about, I got to ask, what's in your mug today?
It's always Tazo tea for me, friend.
Tazo tea?
I do a blend between Tazo's Zen and sometimes English breakfast. If I'm feeling a little bit, spicy, I'll do some a heavier green tea. But
Yeah.
just some tea. I'm a tea gal today.
Yeah, it's also later for you, East Coast, so I get it. I'm here
Drinking.
with iced coffee again. It's kind of like my afternoon go-to right now. And iced coffee and matcha are really what I tolerate most right now in this era of pregnancy. And it's so good. And I'm using it's one of my favorite mugs that I got from a local artist here on the coast that I found in a shop. And just reminds me of the ocean and calmness. And it feels perfect for this conversation.
And you have the best mugs and the best treats. I love this.
I try. It's a skill I've been curating for a long time, and now I have a chance to show it off and talk about it. So this is fantastic. So what I want to get into today, Ronnie, is I want to talk about something that's probably one of the most vulnerable conversations that I will facilitate and probably have in a very long time because it's going to feel very personal. So, of course, you're the perfect person for it. But I want to get into the topic of how do you lead yourself when you're in an era of when you feel like you've lost yourself? And what I mean by that is, as humans, we naturally go through very ebbs and flows. And especially right now, over the last like 5 years, there's been so much change and transition in the world, in the workplace, for a lot of people personally, that sometimes it feels like an era of what you would say maybe like a season of glowing. But for many, I think there's been really difficult seasons of what's going on, who am I? And there's a lot of loss of identity. And I had one of those most potently recently, right as I um, found out I was pregnant and felt really sick. And just completely, as I would say, I felt very lost for myself, which we can get into. But I think this is something that happens for many people, whether they've been laid off from a job they had for a long time, or their company has suddenly changed. They don't have the same connection to that, or they had kids, or, there's so many of those potent life moments that I think can really throw people for a loop. And I know between my experience and yours and what we lead clients through, there's probably some really richness that we can share around how to find yourself again and lead yourself through those really densely foggy moments.
I'm excited for the conversation. There's so many ways we can dive into this. And I think the idea, I love that you've provided that kind of the timeline perspective because we're talking about things happening real time, not things necessarily always in retrospect, and probably things that are speaking to any number of inflections that individuals are experiencing real time as they're listening. So I'm ready to dive in because the angles on this thing, whoo, okay. I feel like we're just like sitting on a cozy couch and we're just having one of those Ronnie and Lindsay conversations.
And grab the mug, hold it close. And I love what you said that the reason why I wanted to have this conversation now is I don't want to reflect on it only after I feel like I've returned to this like more stable, blissful place because um that's not that isn't we're not always it's not always possible. And I feel like Lennon Doyle talks about this a lot, that a lot of people talk about difficult experiences when they're on the other end of it versus when they're in the messy middle, excuse me. And I think that's really important to be reflecting and coming back to yourself when you're in the hard, even if you don't know what's on the other side of it and how you're going to get through it.
I think there are so many levels to that reflection. It's hard. I think it's hard when we think about just being really honest with ourselves and exploring, like when we're in it, right? When we're in it, as you're mentioning, because I think there's just an expectation of how we have to cosplay okayness versus share everything. And so people are battling real life things and are in this era where just showing up as a whole human has all these different terms, conditions, and requirements. So it's completely unsurprising that people feel hesitant to talk about the mess, the things in the messy middle. I've heard, if I can recall the podcaster, I will mention their name, but essentially they were talking about the fact that when they're going through something, they won't always show like the gory part. They may show, like, to be gross, like the scab or maybe the scar, but maybe
Yeah.
not the scrape, maybe not the scrape, you know? So that's for their own self-preservation. They don't show that publicly, but within the realm of their family and friends and trusted people, they know for sure they have to have some outlet in some way to offload the reality of this thing we call life because life is lifing every single day. And it's hard to hold on to yourself in the course of everything shifting in a
Yeah.
way that you didn't anticipate.
And sometimes you're not ready to speak about it because you don't really know how to grapple with it. And I think, or how to communicate it, or there can sometimes be shame involved, or fear of judgment, or even judgment of self. I know that was a big thing for me. And so, just to share a little bit more context, which you know well, but for those listening, I found out, I guess, late April, that I was pregnant. And within 2 weeks, like clockwork, I immediately got extremely sick, about 6 weeks pregnant. And, there's a whole spectrum of sickness in pregnancy, but for me, it really took me out. And I just immediately was almost like bedridden for majority of the time every day. And like, gosh, getting sick, throwing up like 5 to 10 times a day. I had no idea what was happening. It took a long time to get some meds going, and even medicated, it was still really tough. And I mean, I remember we'd have calls and I was just in survival mode in bed talking to you, and I'd have to kind of show up for either engagements we had or coaching calls I'd have. And I remember turning it on and somehow my body would be like, we got this. And then afterwards just crumble down. And what was so hard in those moments is I didn't have any of my normal coping mechanisms or the parts of life that made me feel like me, that, I couldn't move my body at all. I wasn't exercising. I wasn't even going on walks. I couldn't even go outside. I'd go outside and get it sick right away. And then I didn't have coffee, which sounds silly, but it's a very grounding thing every day. Couldn't go into the coffee shop and work anymore. Couldn't eat food and cook. So I couldn't even really have connection because there's a lot of people I wasn't telling, or the people I were telling were far away. And, I didn't have a lot of time to sit with and be with people. I was really didn't even have the energy for that. So it just, I felt so like, who am I? I don't even know who I am. I don't have anything, my normal coping mechanisms, the things that make me feel like me. And I didn't know what the next day was going to bring. And when you're in a really dark hole of something that you don't know when will end, it's really hard to imagine, to remember what it's like to be healthy or okay or stable. And it's really hard to imagine that it will change and get better. So there's very little, I found it very hard to find something to grab onto beyond like, my God, is this a new me? And how do I, what brings me joy in this season? Because right now I can't find it. And it was just, it was really overwhelming. And I share that because, everyone's pregnancy journey is different, but I think we all have moments in our lives when, in somewhere on that spectrum, feel those type of emotions, that type of personal loss and grief of ourselves or with
Yes.
ourselves. But I'm going to pause there and get your reflection either on your own experience or in what I shared.
Well, a few things. One, I smile like a little bit because witnessing you through this time period and, just witnessing because that like that evolution and like changing, evolving, retreating from, returning to yourself is a very personal thing. Mom of three here who has gone through a lot of what you've described that you've been navigating since April. Yes, like even you describing it, it's just like the PTSD. It's like right on my shoulder, right in my neck. I can feel the moments. However, just like I have to acknowledge witnessing you through this time period, even as a friend, like when we notice ourselves is one thing, when we notice our friends evolving, it's hard to really be right there with someone. But I know the witnessing of someone and acknowledging them is always the frankly the most and the most amazing thing, but sometimes even the starting point and the bare minimum anyone can do because life this is going to happen. There are multiple people going through different things at the same time, and just witnessing is a starting point. For me, those seasons when they've occurred have been isolating. They've been confusing. And I liken it to someone was asking, like, how does it feel to go through like such significant life changes? And you're mentioning the before times versus now. Will it ever go back to feeling that way? I tell people, I was like, you ever have a cold or are you ever congested? You're like, man, I really remember the days where I could breathe fully through my nose. I really took those days for granted. And sometimes it feels cloudy and mucky and murky just like that because a previous version absolutely exists. And you hope that some semblance of that is available to you. And then knowing full well that the future could be any range of things, like not to liken pregnancy to a cold, but like likening the idea of transformation when you're conscious of it to be like just that frustrating. It can be
Yeah,
frustrating. The thing that I've noticed on the other side of it though, especially the big transformations where you're forever changed, whether it's hard one that's prickly and sticky or one that you facilitated on your own, is that the induction into your new self can be as cloudy and sticky and difficult. And I do not know if we allow ourselves range and space to talk about that enough. And
such a
sometimes
good
I
point.
find that that is where the real ugh starts.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I feel like, first of all, I want to acknowledge one thing you said. Few things. First, I want to thank you for being so present and witnessing and holding space and being such a solid force of one of the few people in that inner circle during that time. And I've come a long way, and I am much more stable, I guess, but still struggling. and still get sick from time to time. But I do want to thank you because it was immensely helpful and you were a guiding light. I also, something that you said of like whether it's something that comes that's unpredictable or it's a change or a transformation that we bring on ourselves. And I think that's actually really interesting because I think that sometimes the times when we can feel most lost from ourselves is the time when we're putting ourselves through something that is meaningful for us, whether you're holding up different boundaries, whether you're shedding an old version of yourself and growing into a new, or letting go of certain people or parts of your life that don't serve you anymore, but you haven't stepped into the new. That is very, very difficult work. And that can be extremely lonely and extremely disorienting. And then giving ourselves the time to reacclimate to like, who am I now? I don't know about you, but so often with clients, when working with them, when they're navigating moments like this, that so often the talk is like you said, I want to get back to me. How do I get back to who I was? I want to feel like this again. And I think it's so much easier to anchor into something that is known. And so it's easy to use that language, to think about that, to want that, to crave it. But then when you think about what I try to encourage my clients, I love your perspective with what you talk to people about. But I try to tell them like, yes, there are things that we want to hold on to remember, like the things that are important to you, are these values that you honored, or is it like certain parts of yourself that are really important, but also remembering that things are like, you can't be that again. We don't want to go backwards. We're not going that way. So you're not going to actually be able to be that full version of yourself, nor do you want to, because you are going to be something wholly new on the other side of this path that you're now walking on. And you have to leave capacity and openness and curiosity to discover who you are now, because I think you will find so much greater home and fulfillment in that. But if you're always looking for what you feel like you've lost, you're going to always be in a moment like a bit of grief and dissatisfaction and like frustration with yourself.
Those are some of the hardest conversations to have, and with clients, they show up for me when actually in a range of situations. It could be when a person is taking on a new title and role and, ascending up a ladder, if you will, if you wanna use that kind of, imagery, a ladder, to be in a seat that is completely uncomfortable and is rooted in vagueness because they have earned their way into being able to manage vague things. However, although they want it, they also want safety and comfort, and they don't want to mess it up. And so there's all these elements of fear that are attached to holding on to or pursuing the thing that they said they wanted for sure. On the other spectrum, there are individuals that I work with and coach who are, say, the inflection is put upon them. They might be laid off or going through a transition or at a stage where they have to, it just makes sense for them to exit or even retire. And I guess the identity that they had of themselves is rooted in a set of circumstances that no longer exist. And the idea of reckoning with what that means from like an esteem, an emotion, an ego standpoint are some of the things that we have to reckon with. And then the other side is safety and peace and all those things. And so, yes, transformation is always afoot. I keep saying lives, there's an inflection point at every turn. But when we think about that from really professionally, because that's how I spend my time with leaders, it's so difficult sometimes for, things to turn out in a way that you didn't expect on the one spectrum where the change is being put upon them. And it's sometimes extremely difficult to live into a vision that you set out for yourself when you don't know all the steps of it or what will come up. And so I deal a lot with that. And the questions that I'm usually asking in that realm, it's usually questions to help kind of agitate that moment in a good way or exfoliate that moment. The questions that I bring up are really curious around like why is this moment happening? Like what's the truth of this moment? So let's say it's a layoff, like why is this moment happening? What's the truth that you're operating from? And then I say, we talk then about the emotions. Like why is this the emotion that's coming up? And then we get to what's like, what do we want to do about that? Understanding that we have full agency, regardless of circumstances, to make choices from an internal locus of control that informs our thoughts and our actions and the decisions that we make. And we don't always feel that way when we're going through it, but it's nice to be able to ask questions to interrupt the thought pattern that sometimes gets in our way when we're going through, frankly, a lot of BS or
Yeah.
change.
Such a good point of often when we're going through these, like your clients navigating those moments are so lucky to have you to bring in that curiosity and break up, like you said, those thought patterns because they can be very spirally and take us deep down, which happened for me. And luckily I was going through and working with, a therapist at the time and still am. And that was similarly powerful to be able to acknowledge and validate my experience, but also allow me to step out of it and like gain perspective that I realize is like I'd be in at a quite an extreme perspective and they'd be able to pull me into a different side and say, let's just let's have that in front of us and walk around it together and really how valid is this and what else it can be true. And I think that's what's powerful about having a coach, or you could be a great friend, it could be a mentor, it could be a therapist, it could be somebody to sit with you in it and not try to fix it because in a lot of those moments and what I was going through, no one could fix it. You can't just suddenly one day it's just okay. Nor should anyone fix that. We have to navigate our way through it. Fixing is not the solution, but instead allow us to examine it and examine ourselves in a way that we haven't been able to before. And one question I'll bring up that was really powerful for me, or like one conversation about it, was there are many times where I'd be asking the question of like, I'm I feel like I'm looking and living a life of a person that I never thought I would be. Like, I feel like I'm negative. I feel like I'm just in just such a dark place that I've never been here before. What if this is who I'm becoming? And a lot of reminders of this is temporary, like, this is not who you are, this is who you are in this moment, and you have not lost the other parts of yourself. It's okay that they're harder to access, so, like, a lot of acceptance and gratitude and grace of, knowing that things can shift, but what my therapist also brought up was, like, "This is really interesting, Lindsay, because you work with a lot of clients who are navigating the kind of a stuckness tension point in their lives or their career, and you help pull them, work with them through it. Maybe this is the chance for you to go through that experience again yourself in your own way to connect to what they're experiencing. But also, how do you go back to the tools that you use with your clients all the time? How can you use them for yourself?
Mm.
And it's really easy to forget that we have access to these things that we talk about every day and help people build every day.
Yeah,
And
the
when
cobbler's children have no shoes is such a very real statement, for sure.
Totally. And so she's like, how do you get back to some of those, just go back to the basics for yourself. And that did actually help a lot. And I'd love to hear a bit about what tools are, if you have any that you want to share that you use with clients. For myself, it was definitely going back into values and realizing like the tension was that I couldn't honor values the way that I normally do around, you know, living a possibility and making the most of moments and connection and compassion, but I could find new ways to do it that might feel a little bit different, but if I bring intentionality to them, could help. And then a practice of mindful self-compassion and realizing I'm always sitting with people to help them find compassion for themselves. And I wasn't doing that for myself to help create capacity for just processing the daily difficulties. So once I started to do that and pause and create those moments for myself, it just allowed me to ease up on some of the fear and judgment.
Yeah, I mean, everything you're saying there, like that process of deepening self-awareness, to me is always a throughway. It's not as easily accessible when you're in the fight, flight, fear, freeze,
Mhm.
survive mode. And when you're in that space, and rightfully so, because you're literally surviving so that you can thrive and growing and changing. And so, of course, why would you not be in that position? When you're in that position, though, it's extremely hard to access some of the broader level, optimistic, resilience-driven thinking. However, when you're able to stop, right, being the cobblers, if you will, to ask curious questions, or I mean, the question that you mentioned your therapist, or you asked as a trigger or a thought from your therapy, the idea of, is this who I'm becoming? Like,
Mm,
I love that question because if I look at it outside looking in, it's such a neutral question because it's an awareness, like, question. It's an awareness raiser. It's like, "Is this who I'm becoming?" And my next follow-up will be like, Do I like that? So what? What about it? There's a series of questions that stream from that versus the tone of it that could feel judgy. But to me, it's
Mhm.
like, oh, that's like a self-awareness stoplight post brilliant question that once we encounter that type of question can definitely take us out of that, fight, flight, fear, freeze so that we can really examine and to the degree that we have self-agency to shift. That is what I do with clients. It is in them and only through them that they're able to do those edits. I just provide a little bit of language and awareness. On the other side, personally, right, as a coach, I interrupt myself all the time when I'm feeling in my body stress related to change and inflection by just doing the things that I have now come to learn and know are things that can get me out of that fight, flight, fear, freeze. And for everyone, that's going to be different. But in the course of doing so many things, like we already talked about, having 3 kids, I've like metamorphosized into a whole different person multiple times over. And that is so destabilizing in a way that other parents kind of know, mothers or birthing people might know specifically because it's at the like core hormonal level that you change. But just being able to, one, have the conversations, ask myself what I need in that moment to just make it through has been the thing that has allowed me a lot more resilience and grace. And knowing like, it's like, you're going to do it again and again and again. Like, okay, so now I've kind of built that reservoir for self-understanding, knowing that now I know I'm going to change. Like change is inevitable. On the other side of it, I get to inform how I deal with those circumstances. And then maybe a little bit beyond that, pick up my paintbrush and start to design a life that feels congruent with this next chapter and era, while also use the word earlier grief, while also giving myself the permission to actually attach that word to the circumstances.
Yeah.
Grief. Like, Lindsay, now, back in my day, okay, mama had a life. I do now too, but the woman who slept in and read books from day to night and just could stay up
Mhm.
late or had more tolerance and bandwidth for different things. I'm obsessed with her. I love her. I'm grateful for her. Giving her up is the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life.
Yeah.
And I think about her daily. But now that grief is, is transitioned to memory and joy. But in
Right.
that moment, I was
Yeah.
grieving. And I have
Yeah.
language for that. And I go there with that truth.
Yeah. I think that's such a good point, and that, like, brings up a lot of emotion only because it's like we don't often I think when you're going through these moments, you have to have a moment of or, like, these transition periods of, like, who is it that I need to say goodbye to say hello to the new version? There's a there's a lot there to process, and I think people don't create the space for that. Like, maybe it's acknowledged, like, there's a lot you're grieving here, even as I think about myself as a coach. A lot for like, a lot of space for you're probably grieving something here, like, there is grief here, like, naming that, but really sitting with, like, just the way you acknowledge your former beautiful versions of yourself that read from day to night, being able to say, "Still think about her, I grieve her, I love her, and I'm grateful for her, but I'm in a new era now, in a new
Yes.
season."
And she's not the one for this era. She helped get me to this era, but if she's completely unqualified for this era. All the versions of me leading up to, including the versions who've had the difficulty of the transition, absolutely were required for me to be able to have the peace, you know, that I have now, just navigating this new era. And that's the hardest thing in any inflection that I've ever, or any change that I've ever had to navigate. Like for parenthood, leaving the corporate world, or from
Yeah.
what I call like a good damn job, right? And, or starting a business
Mhm.
and, grieving even processes and systems that I felt kept me safe that
Yeah.
no longer serve me, or grieving these circumstances that are of my choosing. There's so many things that I've had to put into that frame of self-understanding and awareness around what the feeling is, but be able to use the G word grief attached to it has been so, I don't know, revelatory and healing for me. Because I mean, like, for me, my experience in grief has been the human sense, family members, like that. So I take that word, I don't take it lightly, right? But it is the same feeling in different
Yeah.
degrees when it comes to self-transformation and or grieving what could have been or what you thought it would be. Those types of things are things I'm talking with clients about all the time and that I reflect on myself whenever I need to.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important acknowledgement around that this is different versions and spectrum of grief because I think often like when we name something, we start to able to tame it in a way, right? Able to like take back a bit of control versus feeling so lost. And it's easy when someone passes to use grief and know what you're grieving because it's very tangible. But when you're
Yes.
in the transitions of, of a life transition, perhaps what I did, or going through new versions of yourself through parenthood or leaving corporate and starting your own business where there's like so much you're building, there can feel like there's so much that you're losing, but if you don't take the time to process and name what it is and make that tangible, it can just be this kind of uncontrollable force in you that is creating tension or dysregulation, um, and sadness. And until, at least in my experience, able to start to understand it by naming and saying, "Oh, I don't have these systems anymore. I don't have my team anymore. I don't have the same type of support that I had before, the same safety before," then it's like, okay, now I understand what I need to say goodbye to. What are those real things I'm saying goodbye to? Okay, so I'm saying no to those things. So what am I saying no to say yes to what? How do I walk myself through that process of letting go and welcoming?
Yes, and making the space. I mean, language is so important. When we're able to just name it and maybe we're naming it, maybe we don't have to claim it. Sometimes it's just like, "Oh, okay, I see what that is over there. If that's what that is, that's not coming along with me." But claiming what you're going through is like saying, "Okay, I'm holding on to this. This is true for me." But I think naming anything is so deeply important when we have these like very dynamic lives and experiences and levels of responsibility. I think the other level there, you said something that just kind of like sparked something for me. The idea of naming something as grief, and then also separately naming something as like a feeling of I don't feel safe. Like those are some of the or I do feel safe. Those are some of the most powerful levels of self-awareness and clarity that I think are available to people, but that we don't always explore deeply enough. They'll be super helpful if we started to, especially as we think about change and shifting and all the types of things that folks are go through.
I think with the grief and the safety
Mhm.
is a different level of vulnerability there.
Yes.
To acknowledge that you're grieving something because it gets into a really tender spot, and to acknowledge that you're not feeling safe, then you have to acknowledge that you are vulnerable,
Yes.
and that can be very difficult
Mhm.
for many people, but
Mhm.
I really do believe that until you're able to acknowledge that for yourself, it's really hard to actually manage it, and then it's more or less managing you, or you are then living in that place of not safety versus, like you said earlier, we always have agency despite our circumstances. So you're able to find choice. Okay, now you understand if you're not feeling safe here, where are the options to bring safety, to bring, to
Right.
process this grief, to start to shift your perspective on it.
I think we get stuck in the tension or frankly the problem and we can't get to
Yeah.
the other side as quickly. It doesn't mean that you move through the feeling, but getting to what you already have as resources and tools to do exactly what you're saying, being able to name something, being able to understand yourself more fully and what's going on around you. Those are the things that as a coach, I do my best to help buoy people towards understanding, recognizing the problem, but then getting to like what is their set of possible approaches, not necessarily solutions, but how they want to approach said problem. I think that's the toolkit I'm hoping we all get to cultivate more, especially in seasons where you're dealing with something new or uncertain. And it's a kind of like, what can I access either from a retrospective point of view or from proximity with my community or wisdom to be able to offset this feeling or this experience right now. And that's available to all of us.
Yeah. It's a fair point. And I think there's what could be the difference is willing to accept what you have access to and willing to do something with it. Like I think sometimes that's why it's important to have the language and the time and the space to acknowledge what you're going through or acknowledge the grieves, the lack of safety, the circumstances that are happening. Because if you don't, you get stuck in them, then you might realize that you have access to this, to these options or resources or tools, but not have the capacity or capability to actually do anything about it. It kind of makes me think about the process of trying to build new habits. And I think that's it. Like through my experience, like I had to wait till I was ready to start to invite, I had a bit more capacity and space and awareness to say yes to new habits that would build resilience during a time of not a lot. And when we think about, I talk about this a lot with clients, like when you have habits that aren't helpful for you or you're stuck in a pattern that is not productive, once you start to realize that you have choice, you have to get to a place of awareness and presence to be like, this is what's going on. This is what I'm facing. This is what's happening, or here's my habit, or whatever it is. And once you have the awareness and presence, the next is to figure out choice. So you're at a place of choice. Are you going to keep doing the same thing over again? Same thought pattern, same action, same behavior? Or are you going to start to choose something different? But if you don't either have what the choice, you don't know what to choose differently, and you only can do the same thing, that causes a lot of frustration and can just perpetuate a lot of the issues. But if you have what you know to choose different, then you can hopefully start to build some of that really resilience if you have the capacity, you have the availability and the access to do so. But I think it's that processing in these moments that we're talking about that you have to do, or else you might see what you need to be doing, but you aren't able to actually choose it and start building up maybe more resilient pattern for you in this moment. And that's okay too, but then that can build up greater, like perpetuate the situation. And so it's how I, at least how I found it, is that the more I was able to give myself time through compassion for me and a bit more grace and honestly acceptance of like, okay, this is a reality that you're in. You now feel a little bit more capacity, a little bit more kindness to yourself. Are you able to stretch before bed and feel better? Are you able to do this meditation? Are you able to actually say no to things to create the time that you need to rest? Choosing things that build that help me build a bit more resilience during a time that felt quite hopeless.
I mean, I love that. It maps back to, I encourage clients, I invite them into the idea of like a testing spirit or a little bit of test
Mm.
and learn,
Oh, I love that.
which looks like all the things that you mentioned, but the framing of a test is intentional because I'm asking them to almost like diminish ego or anything that's attached to perfection or anything that's attached to some other person's perception of uh, amount, strength, volume, intensity, when it's just, what do you require right now? That's the number one question. What do you require? What would be a pathway to do that? And what are the steps you want to test into that? Not just do, like, here are the 10 things I'm going to do. I work with a lot of ambitious people who are like, all right, I'm having this issue. And now I'm going to do all these things to feel better, or do all these things to be okay, or do all these things to do a good job. And that in and of itself is, an important ledge to help pull people back from and give them permission to just be and give themselves grace to just try to do things that can, to your point, build in some type of habit that can help them with that resilience well, or help them navigate uncertainty or all the things that they are going through. But test and learn and exploratory actions like that is something that I found to be helpful to clients, but I do it myself. I'm testing things all the time.
You have to have that kind of fluid mindset, because if you remaining stuck and saying, this is what I'm going to do and this is going to fix it, or not fix it, but change it or something, then you're just creating a circumstance that is going to perpetuate some of the emotions that might already be you're struggling with or folks are struggling with. But if you frame it as, this is the test and learn, this is something for me to experiment on, and it's okay if it doesn't work, and it's great if it does, it's all just data to move me forward. And it helps take a lot of like the shame and pressure and ambition and perfectionist out of it, like you said. So Ronnie, I'm just curious, what are, do you have any final words or reflections to kind of bring us home around navigating seasons of life how do you lead yourself when you've lost yourself?
I think it's so fascinating because I think about the idea of losing myself in these waves, and I keep using the word change and transformation. It's almost like losing myself to me looks like letting go of versions of myself that were either available or present at certain moments. And maybe there's some things attached to that version that I really want, but there's some type of circumstance that has made that not true. So my wisdom in that is like hold on tight to what's true, which is change is inevitable, shifts are inevitable, but also hold on to what's true is that you have everything possible to self-regulate, to center yourself. And I'm not say everything like in you, but also your resources and community, especially when you feel that you have taken a retreat from yourself. There's so many things that can serve as your own personal homecoming. And sometimes they're just the subtle things that are all around you. I mean, the times like in parenthood is notable when I have, again, left versions of her in 2016 and forward and beyond. Um, the wisdom there has always been my community has helped me reimagine the next iteration, or me not just trying to fix it and do has helped me see that the next iteration of me was happening real time. I didn't need to codify it or limit what wasn't. I just need to exist. And so I mean, stream of consciousness, but there's a level of resiliency and grace and self-understanding, right? That should expect that you're going to retreat from yourself many, many
Yeah.
times. Now, that doesn't mean dishonor yourself or disrespect yourself or any of those
Yeah.
types of things. And other those are spectrums, but you will leave behind a version of yourself that was the needed version for a season many, 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 many times. On the other side of that retreat, homecoming looks like, or maybe it's a housewarming. I don't know what the phrase is. Walking into the next version of yourself, like clear about it, is one of the most exhilarating feelings.
Yeah.
And I love the version of me right now, but I know something it's just almost like a system upgrade and the app doesn't work anymore and you gotta like, "Oh, there's a bug in the system." Something's going to happen at some point where the current version is not serving me, and
Yeah.
it's gonna feel hard. But I always look forward to that, that homecoming, that housewarming or whatever is going to show up on the other side because it's just keep on living. Like now in my 40s, I just expect it. So
Yeah.
keep on living, and we realize you have way more agency than you think once you have language and self-awareness that this is going to happen again and again.
I think that expecting it is powerful versus like thinking that that you're immune to it. And it's really, really beautiful. I think you just shared and it sparked a couple of things in me I want to reflect on to close. And because I'm still in it, as I've mentioned. And I think one of the most powerful things I've had to do, or the word I kind of chose for this summer and this season, is surrender. I don't think I've ever really truly surrendered to anything before, or to like even to grief or to change. Like I think I've always found a way to perform through it, to be so resilient, to rise above, to whatever, whether for the bettering of myself or the detriment of myself. And this season has given me no choice but to surrender in a way I've never been able to before, or never had to before. And that has given me, though, it gave me a lot of peace because it was like, oh, you can't control your way. I can't control my way through this. And I also do genuinely believe, like, I had to figure out, how do I honor possibility for myself in this moment when it feels like I don't know, very lost. And I realize I'm like, I do genuinely believe that the possibility here is that everything that I'm going through is preparing me so much for what is to come and for the next seasons to come. And I'm like, it's similar, like you talk a lot about your past person. I'm like, well, I can't wait to meet, like, who is Lindsay in this next season, because rising from the ashes from this moment, because I have no idea. But I do wholeheartedly believe, not just like, oh, I'm optimistic about this. It's like, I do wholeheartedly believe that every moment of this is preparing me for something. I don't know what, but it'll prepare me for whatever that next season is.
Friend, I know that to be true. I know that to be true. And it's not that I have some crystal ball, but it's like the idea of just keep on living
Keep on
because
living. I love that.
yeah, just keep on living. And, this is a different season, but I know full well you can look back into previous versions and see exactly what you're hoping and expecting. Like everything that's happening now is preparing you for something next. You have done that time and time again. And we all have. I mean, selfishly, I'm excited for the evolution of Lindsay, especially as, I don't know, your wisdom and your brilliance is already just so poignant, but going through all the things that you have and navigated for the last year and having those, like, again, scrapes, scars, and scabs or whatever, scrapes, scabs, and scars, it's one thing to be in it, but it's another thing to have the level of codified wisdom on the other side of it. And I'm just cannot wait to be one of those recipients of the delight of your space, time, and wisdom as you move through.
Thank you, and thanks for being one of the people that's not just helping as I navigate through it, but for someone who continues to gift us with so much wisdom. And with me, I learn something different from you every single day. And I know there are so many gems that everyone is picking up from this conversation, thanks to your brilliance and reflection and your wisdom. So thank you, Ronnie. And I want to end on a couple quick things. The first is, can you reflect? You know, a big part of my story and what I work a lot with clients is reflecting on times and navigating times of, when you can choose make decisions from a place of possibility over fear. Can you share with us a moment of reflection of when is a time in your life that you chose possibility over fear?
Oh my goodness, like, literally, like, quitting a good damn job and then starting my own company. That was, like, the craziest thing if I look back on it, it's like, "Oh, no," but it's just it did not make sense for me to stay on the track that I was on because the other track, now that it's blossomed beautifully, was the one that actually was attached to what I feel my purpose is, which is to drive impact for other individuals by helping make work and workplaces a lot better.
Yeah.
To be able to do that for more people was only possible by being able to do it in this way. And it was felt risky in the moment, especially doing it while pregnant, like jumping off of a cliff with wet wings while having a baby in my tummy and funding my own maternity leave for my last child was not necessarily the most calculated risk that other people would take, but it worked for me. It actually was a well calculated risk. And so the possibility to me was so many amazing, brilliant things that have now blossomed. And there's a few more things that I'm even doing real time while I'm writing my book.
Yes,
I'm
you
writing my
are.
first book, but I'm in this season where I'm making, frankly, strategic bets on my future. Like Ronnie 5 to 7 years from now. There are things that I'm setting up now because 5 to 7 years from now, that's me quite frankly, inching into my 50s soon thereafter, preparing for retirement, which is crazy to say. I'm still a young tender, but this is a time where that idea of legacy planning for the future is in play, and I'm being stretched right now. I am really, really being stretched, and I'm finding now that I want to enjoy this version of myself because the future version of myself does depend on me to enjoy this moment, but also to create a provision for her. So I'm in this like interesting moment. And it feels good, but it's new. It's a different feeling.
Yeah, you're in your own moment of transition right now.
Mhm.
And I mean, with so much possibility ahead of you and so much legacy building. And I learn from you every single day. Thank you so much for coming and having this conversation. And I think we all are wiser and more attuned and to ourselves and to our agency because of you. And how can folks find you, get more of your brilliance and support? How can they find you?
Well, there are 3 ways. I first invite every single person to connect with me on LinkedIn. Like, that is where I spend a lot of my time. If you send me a message or say that you've listened to this show, then I will definitely send you a voice memo back because I love a good voice memo these days. So please, LinkedIn is
You and
my
me both.
platform of choice, right? We love some LinkedIn. And the other way is, I have a podcast as well called The Career Clinic Podcast. Lindsay is like the person who's guest appeared on that podcast the most and has, again, the most amazing episodes, which I think I continue to listen to and recommend to clients, and they get so much value out of. So check that out. And from there, we'll be connected. On LinkedIn, you can join my newsletter. It's right on my profile. And if you want to see me in your inbox every Monday with a good word, I will be there if you join that community of people who just love a good word to start their week. So that's how you can connect. And I hope to hear from you all and hear how this conversation added value to your week or your day or your month.
Thanks, Ronnie. I highly recommend the newsletter as one of the many ways. I mean, you give so much brilliance but that newsletter every week is you just share so much. So it's really powerful. Folks, please sign up. Ronnie, thank you for getting unfiltered with me today. This was
Thank
powerful.
you,
You're
friend.
brilliant. We love you. Talk
We
to you
love you
soon.
back.